Ethan Walker was used to being invisible. Every day he worked quietly at the luxurious Maplewood Estates resort, trimming hedges, planting flowers, and making sure the grounds looked perfect. Most people barely glanced at him as they strolled through the perfectly manicured gardens. But on that particular day, something caught his eye: a small girl, no more than 10 years old, standing alone near the main entrance. She looked out of place among the lavish surroundings. Her clothes were worn, her hair was tangled, and her eyes seemed distant, as if she were searching for something, or someone. Ethan hesitated. His job was to maintain the gardens, not to get involved in guests' affairs. But something about her posture, the way she shivered slightly, made it impossible for him to turn away. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay?" Ethan asked softly as he approached her, crouching down to her level. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide and teary. She didn't say a word, just shook her head and wrapped her arms tightly around herself. Ethan's heart clenched. He glanced around, but no one else seemed to notice. People walked by, chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the little girl who looked like she was about to collapse. He knew he had to do something. Without a second thought, he took out his phone and called an ambulance, explaining the situation to the operator. "I found a little girl. She looks unwell. Please, we need help," he pleaded, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over him. He hoped he was doing the right thing. The rules at the resort were strict. Employees were not supposed to get involved in guest matters unless instructed by management. But this felt different. This was about a child's well-being. When the ambulance finally arrived, Ethan guided the paramedics to where the girl was sitting, now slumped against the garden wall. "She hasn't spoken," he explained, his voice low but firm. The paramedics checked her vitals, and one of them turned to Ethan with a nod. "You did the right thing, sir. We'll take it from here." Ethan watched as they carefully lifted the girl onto a stretcher and wheeled her into the ambulance. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. What would his supervisor say? Would he get in trouble for taking action on his own? He tried to shake off the worry, telling himself that the child's safety was what mattered most. As the ambulance drove away, Ethan stood there, feeling strangely empty. He hoped the girl would be okay. He'd probably never see her again, but at least he knew he'd done what he could. Little did he know that his decision to help would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Maplewood Estates, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. He was happy knowing the girl received the help she needed, but he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that trouble was waiting for him. As he stepped into the garden shed to start his day, a voice boomed through the small space. "Ethan, Mr. Sanders wants to see you in his office. Now." Ethan looked up and saw Mike, one of the other gardeners, standing at the door with a worried expression. Ethan nodded slowly, wiped his hands on his work pants, and made his way to the resort's administrative wing. His heart pounded with each step, and when he finally stood outside Mr. Sanders' office, he took a deep breath before knocking. "Come in," Mr. Sanders' voice called out sternly. Ethan pushed the door open and entered. Mr. Sanders, the resort's manager, sat behind a large mahogany desk. He looked up, his cold, calculating eyes narrowing as he gestured for Ethan to sit down. Ethan swallowed hard and did as instructed, bracing himself for what was to come. "Do you have any idea what you did yesterday, Ethan?" Mr. Sanders began, his voice low but laced with anger. "Calling an ambulance without consulting anyone, bringing that kind of attention to the resort." Ethan shifted in his seat. "Sir, the girl was alone and looked really sick. I couldn't just leave her like that. I thought—" "You thought?" Mr. Sanders interrupted, his voice rising. "Your job is not to think, Ethan. Your job is to tend to the gardens, follow orders, and stay out of sight. We have a reputation to maintain here, and your actions have put that at risk." Ethan felt his face flush. "I understand, but what else was I supposed to do? She needed help." "Help?" Mr. Sanders leaned forward, his gaze icy. "Do you realize what this could have cost us? The reputation of Maplewood Estates is everything. We cater to elite guests who expect discretion, not some spectacle involving ambulances and strangers." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Mr. Sanders raised his hand sharply. "Enough. You've overstepped your boundaries. I have no choice but to let you go." "Pack your things and leave the premises immediately." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. Fired? For trying to help a child in need? He stared at Mr. Sanders, his mind reeling. But he could see there was no room for argument. The decision had already been made. With a heavy heart, Ethan rose from his chair. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble, Mr. Sanders," he said quietly, "but I don't regret helping her." Mr. Sanders didn't respond, just waved him off dismissively. Ethan turned and walked out of the office, feeling numb. As he made his way back to the garden shed to collect his tools, he noticed the other staff members watching him silently. Some averted their eyes while others whispered among themselves. Gathering his few belongings, Ethan took one last look at the place he had worked so hard to keep beautiful. He felt a surge of sadness and frustration, but underneath it all, a quiet resolve remained. He had done what he believed was right, and that was something no one could take away from him. With his head held high, Ethan walked through the gates of Maplewood Estates for what he thought was the last time. He had no idea that a new chapter in his life was just beginning. Ethan stepped out of the gates of Maplewood Estates, feeling a mix of defeat and confusion. He had just lost his job for doing what he thought was right. As he walked down the pathway leading away from the resort, his mind raced with questions. How was he going to pay rent this month? What would he tell his family? He felt like he was drifting, lost in a fog of uncertainty. Just as he reached the parking lot, a sleek black car pulled up beside him. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a man dressed in a sharp-tailored suit. His eyes were calm but intense, and he looked at Ethan with a hint of curiosity. "Ethan Walker?" the man asked, his voice steady. Ethan blinked, taken aback. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly. "Actually, I believe I'm the one who can help you. My name is Thomas Walker, and I'm Abigail's father, the girl you helped yesterday." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Abigail, the girl from the garden. He could hardly believe it. "Is she okay?" he asked quickly. "I've been worried about her. I didn't know what happened after—" "She's doing well, thanks to you," Thomas interrupted gently. "We took her to the hospital and they said she was suffering from exhaustion and dehydration. If you hadn't called for help when you did, things could have been much worse. You saved her life, Ethan." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I'm glad she's okay," he murmured, his voice filled with genuine concern. But then reality hit him again. "I lost my job because of it, though," he added with a sigh. Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, I heard. And that's precisely why I'm here." He paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "What if I told you that everything that happened was part of an experiment?" Ethan frowned, confused. "An experiment? What do you mean?" Thomas leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving Ethan's. "I wanted to see how people would react when faced with someone in need. Abigail wasn't really lost. She was placed in that situation under controlled conditions to see if anyone would step up to help her. Unfortunately, most people just walked by, ignoring her. Except for you." Ethan's mouth dropped open in shock. "Wait, so all of this was a test?" "Yes," Thomas said quietly. "And you were the only one who showed true compassion. I know it might sound strange, but I needed to know if there were still people out there who would do the right thing, no matter the consequences. I'm sorry that it cost you your job. That was never my intention." Ethan shook his head, still trying to process everything. "But why? Why go through all this trouble?" Thomas looked at him thoughtfully. "Because I believe that kindness and empathy are rare qualities these days, and I also believe that people like you should be given opportunities to make a bigger difference." Before Ethan could respond, Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "I run a foundation that helps children and families in need. We provide resources, education, and support to those who are struggling. I could use someone like you, someone with a genuine heart and the courage to act. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a position with us." Ethan stared at the card, his mind spinning. A job offer? From a man like Thomas Walker? It felt surreal. "I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Take your time," Thomas said, smiling warmly. "Think it over. But remember this, Ethan. People like you are hard to find, and I believe you're capable of much more than you think." With that, Thomas handed Ethan the card and gave him a nod before rolling up the window. The car pulled away, leaving Ethan standing there, still stunned. He looked down at the card in his hand, reading the name and contact information over and over. Thomas Walker, Walker Family Foundation. Ethan took a deep breath. Everything had changed in an instant. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time since he'd left the resort, he felt a flicker of hope. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Ethan. After being abruptly fired, he felt lost and unsure of his next steps. But the conversation with Thomas Walker replayed in his mind over and over again. He stared at the business card Thomas had given him, wondering if he should make the call. He couldn't help but feel skeptical. Was this offer real, or just another twist in what had already been a confusing experience? Finally, after much hesitation, Ethan dialed the number on the card. His hands trembled slightly as the phone rang. On the fourth ring, a friendly voice answered, "Walker Family Foundation. How may I assist you?" Ethan cleared his throat nervously. Hi, my name is Ethan Walker. I spoke with Mr. Walker a few days ago and— Mr. Walker. Yes, Mr. Thomas is expecting your call. Please hold for a moment," the receptionist interrupted, her voice suddenly more formal. Ethan's heart raced as he waited. After a few seconds, a familiar voice came on the line. "Ethan, I'm so glad you called," Thomas said warmly. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Ethan replied slowly. "And, I'm interested in learning more about the foundation, but I'm not sure I'm the right fit. I mean, I've only ever been a gardener. I don't know if I have the skills you need." "Let me stop you right there," Thomas said, his tone serious but kind. "You have something far more valuable than any skill or qualification. You have heart, Ethan. You saw a child in distress, and you acted without hesitation. That's the kind of person I want on my team." Ethan fell silent, absorbing Thomas's words. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, as if he were capable of something truly meaningful. "What exactly would I be doing?" he asked cautiously. "Initially, I'd like you to shadow me," Thomas explained. "Get to know the different projects we're working on, meet the families we help, and see if there's a specific area you'd like to focus on. After that, we can talk about a more permanent role." The idea of stepping into such an unknown world was daunting but also exciting. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Walker," Ethan said sincerely. "I'll give it my best." "Call me Thomas," he replied with a chuckle. "And I know you will. Let's meet tomorrow at the Foundation's office downtown. I'll introduce you to the team and show you around." The next morning, Ethan found himself standing in front of a modern office building with Walker Family Foundation etched in gold letters above the entrance. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the glass doors and stepped inside. A wave of nerves washed over him, but he reminded himself of Thomas's words. He had heart, and that was what mattered. Thomas greeted him in the lobby and led him through the bright, bustling office. He introduced Ethan to various staff members, each one friendly and welcoming. Ethan listened attentively as Thomas explained the Foundation's mission, providing support to underprivileged children and their families, offering educational programs, healthcare assistance, and community outreach projects. Ethan felt overwhelmed by the scope of their work, but as they visited different departments, something shifted inside him. He met kids whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's efforts, kids who now had a chance at a brighter future. He watched as Thomas interacted with them, full of warmth and encouragement. By the end of the day, Ethan's uncertainty began to fade. Maybe he didn't have a background in social work or management, but he had something else, a desire to help, to make a real difference, and that was a good place to start. "So, what do you think?" Thomas asked as they wrapped up the tour. Ethan took a deep breath and looked around the office, then back at Thomas. I want to be part of this." Thomas smiled broadly and extended his hand. "Welcome to the Walker Family Foundation, Ethan. This is just the beginning." The first few weeks at the Walker Family Foundation were a blur for Ethan. He spent his days shadowing Thomas, learning about the different programs and getting a feel for how the organization operated. It was a lot to take in, and at times, Ethan wondered if he would ever fully grasp it all. But as the days passed, he began to settle into his new role. One morning, Thomas invited Ethan to accompany him to a community center the foundation supported. As they entered the bustling building, filled with laughter and chatter, Ethan noticed a group of children painting murals on the walls. He saw the joy on their faces, the sense of pride they took in their work. It was a far cry from the polished, sterile environment of the resort he'd worked at before. "This is one of our after-school programs," Thomas explained as they watched the kids at work. "It's a safe space where they can express themselves, learn, and just be kids. Many of them come from tough backgrounds. We try to give them a little bit of stability and hope." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. He could see how much this place meant to the children. He walked around, chatting with a few of them, asking about their paintings. One boy, about 8 years old, showed him a bright drawing of a house surrounded by flowers. "It's where I want to live someday," the boy said shyly. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "It's beautiful," he murmured, "and I'm sure one day you will." Later that day, Thomas pulled Ethan aside. "I wanted to show you this place because I think it's where you could make a real difference. You have a way of connecting with people, especially kids. They need someone like you, someone they can look up to, who listens." Ethan felt both humbled and uncertain. "But I'm just a gardener," he said softly. "I'm not sure I know how to teach or mentor." Thomas shook his head. "It's not about teaching or mentoring in the traditional sense. It's about being present, showing them that someone cares. You've already proven you can do that." Encouraged by Thomas's words, Ethan began spending more time at the community center. He helped organize activities, assisted with art projects, and even got involved in setting up a small garden behind the building, a piece of his old life that he could bring to this new one. The kids took to him quickly, always eager to show him their drawings or tell him about their day. Ethan found himself looking forward to those moments. The sense of purpose he felt was unlike anything he'd experienced before. Slowly, he began to see that he wasn't just fitting in at the foundation, he was becoming an integral part of it. His presence made a difference, not just to the kids, but to the entire staff. Word spread quickly about the new guy at the foundation, who seemed to have a special way with the children. Even the toughest cases, the kids who rarely spoke or participated, began to open up around Ethan. His gentle nature and willingness to listen, without judgment or expectation, created a space where they felt safe. One day, Thomas called Ethan into his office. "You've been doing an incredible job," he said, handing Ethan a folder. "I want you to take a look at this proposal. It's for a new program, one that focuses on providing mentorship and career guidance to teenagers who are at risk of dropping out of school." Ethan scanned the document, his eyes widening as he took in the details. "You want me to run this?" he asked incredulously. Thomas nodded. "I think you're more than capable. This could be your project, Ethan. You'd be the one to shape it, to decide how we approach it." Ethan's mind raced. It was a huge responsibility, one that he never imagined he would have. But as he looked at the proposal and thought about the kids he'd already met, a sense of determination took hold of him. He wanted to give them a chance to dream big, just like the boy who'd shown him his drawing of the house. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "I'll give it everything I have." Thomas smiled. "I knew you would." With that, Ethan's role at the foundation shifted once more. He was no longer just a volunteer or an assistant. He was a leader, taking charge of a program that had the potential to change lives. It was a challenge, but one he embraced wholeheartedly. And as the program took shape, Ethan knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. As Ethan settled into his new role at the foundation, he felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. Every day brought new challenges, but also new rewards. He saw firsthand how the mentorship program was making a difference in the lives of teenagers who were often overlooked. For the first time, he felt like he was truly making an impact. One crisp afternoon, as Ethan wrapped up a meeting with a group of volunteers, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the front desk. "Someone here to see you, says it's urgent." Ethan frowned. curiosity mixed with a hint of concern. He couldn't think of anyone who would come looking for him without calling first. He made his way to the lobby, where he spotted a familiar figure standing awkwardly by the entrance. It was Mr. Sanders, the manager from Maplewood Estates. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't seen or heard from him since the day he was fired. "What could he possibly want now, Mr. Sanders?" Ethan greeted cautiously. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Sanders looked uncomfortable, almost out of place among the warmth and friendliness of the Foundation's atmosphere. He cleared his throat and glanced around nervously before meeting Ethan's gaze. "Ethan, I wanted to talk. If you have a moment?" Ethan nodded slowly, still unsure of what to make of the situation. "Sure, let's step into one of the meeting rooms." Once they were seated, a tense silence filled the room. Mr. Sanders shifted uneasily in his chair, his usually confident demeanor nowhere to be found. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke. "I saw the news about you, about the work you're doing here, and I wanted to say that I'm sorry." Ethan blinked in surprise. Of all the things he expected to hear, an apology was not one of them. "You're sorry," he repeated, not quite believing his ears. "Yes," Mr. Sanders replied, his voice low. "I know I treated you unfairly. I didn't see the bigger picture. I was so focused on protecting the resort's image that I didn't realize I was pushing away a good person. I shouldn't have fired you for helping that girl. It was wrong." Ethan felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, frustration, and something like pity. He had moved on from that chapter of his life, but seeing Mr. Sanders now, humbled and regretful, brought back memories of that difficult time. He remembered how devastated he felt, how unsure he was about his future. "Thank you for saying that," Ethan said quietly. "But I'm not looking for an apology. I've found a new path, one that's more meaningful than anything I could have imagined. What happened back then? It led me here." Mr. Sanders nodded, looking down at his hands. "I can see that. I wanted to let you know that I admire what you've done. You've accomplished so much in such a short time, and, well, I thought maybe we could stay in touch. You know, if you ever want to talk or—" Ethan shook his head gently. "Mr. Sanders, I appreciate your words, but I think it's best if we leave things as they are. I've made peace with what happened, and I'm focused on the future now." Mr. Sanders opened his mouth as if to protest, but then closed it again. He seemed to understand that there were no more words that could change what had already been done. He gave a small, resigned nod. "I understand, Ethan. I wish you the best." With that, he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. For a long moment, Ethan sat in silence, reflecting on the unexpected encounter. He felt no bitterness, no resentment, just a sense of closure. Mr. Sanders's visit was like the final piece of a puzzle, allowing Ethan to fully embrace his new life without any lingering shadows from the past. The door opened softly, and Thomas stepped in, a curious look on his face. "Was that who I think it was?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, it was. He came to apologize." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm okay. I think he needed to say it more than I needed to hear it. I'm not angry anymore. If anything, I'm grateful. If he hadn't let me go, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have found this place, or the kids, or myself." Thomas clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "That's a good way of looking at it. You've come a long way, Ethan. And I'm proud of you." Ethan looked around the office, the place that had become his second home, and felt a deep sense of peace. "I'm proud too, Thomas. Proud of what we're building here and proud of the man I'm becoming." Ethan's impact at the Walker Family Foundation didn't go unnoticed. His natural ability to connect with both the kids and the staff, combined with his unwavering dedication, began to draw attention from outside the organization. Local news outlets started covering his work, highlighting his journey from an ordinary gardener to a community leader making a significant difference in people's lives. One morning, as Ethan reviewed some reports in his office, Thomas burst through the door, a wide grin on his face. "Ethan, have you seen the news today?" he asked, waving a newspaper excitedly. Ethan shook his head, puzzled. "No, I haven't had a chance to look yet. "What's going on?" Thomas handed him the paper. There, on the front page of the local section, was a picture of Ethan surrounded by smiling children at the community center. The headline read, "From Gardener to Guardian, Ethan Walker's Journey of Compassion and Hope." Ethan stared at the article, his eyes widening. "They're talking about me," he whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. "They're more than talking about you," Thomas said proudly. "You've become the face of this foundation, Ethan. People are starting to recognize the work we're doing because of your story, and that's just the beginning." Ethan felt a strange mix of pride and humility. He had never sought recognition or praise. He simply wanted to help. But seeing his story in print, knowing that it might inspire others to act with kindness and empathy, filled him with a sense of purpose. As the weeks passed, the foundation received an influx of support. Donations increased, volunteers signed up in droves, and new partnerships were formed with local businesses and schools. Ethan's presence, along with his personal story of resilience and determination, seemed to resonate with everyone who heard it. During a fundraising event at the foundation's headquarters, Ethan was approached by the mayor of the city. "I just want to say thank you, Mr. Walker," the mayor said, extending his hand. "Your work has made a real impact on our community. You're a role model, not just for the kids, but for all of us." Ethan felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm just trying to do my part," he replied modestly. The mayor smiled and shook his head. "Don't sell yourself short. It's people like you who remind us that one person can truly make a difference." Shortly after that event, Ethan received a formal invitation to a citywide awards ceremony. The letter stated that he would be honored with a Community Hero Award for his contributions and service. Ethan was stunned. He never imagined being in the spotlight for something like this. But he accepted the invitation, knowing it was an opportunity to bring even more attention to the foundation's cause. The night of the awards ceremony, Ethan found himself standing on a stage, looking out at a sea of faces, friends, colleagues, and strangers alike. Thomas stood beside him, beaming with pride, as the mayor presented Ethan with a medal and a plaque. "Ethan Walker has shown us all what it means to be a true hero," the mayor announced to the crowd. "Not a hero who seeks fame or fortune, but one who acts selflessly, putting the needs of others before his own. We are honored to recognize him for his incredible dedication and courage." As the applause filled the room, Ethan glanced down at the medal in his hands. It felt heavy, not because of its physical weight, but because of what it represented. Every life he had touched, every child he had helped, every challenge he had faced. For a moment he felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all, but then, through the crowd, he saw a small figure making her way toward the stage. It was Abigail. She was smiling up at him, her eyes shining with admiration. Ethan knelt down to her level as she handed him a single flower, a simple daisy. "This is for you," she whispered, "because you showed me that kindness is the strongest thing in the world." Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. He accepted the flower and hugged Abigail gently. "Thank you, Abigail. You're the reason I'm here. Never forget that." Standing up, he looked out at the audience, holding the daisy in one hand and the medal in the other. "I don't see myself as a hero," he began, his voice steady and calm. "I'm just someone who believes that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can make a big difference. And if my story has inspired even one person here tonight to take that step, to show compassion and help someone in need, then I consider myself truly blessed." The room erupted in applause once more, but Ethan felt only a deep, peaceful gratitude. This recognition wasn't just for him. It was for every child he'd met, every person who had believed in him, and for the power of empathy that brought them all. Ethan's life took on a new rhythm as the foundation continued to grow. With the recognition and support pouring in from all sides, the organization was able to expand its reach, helping more children and families than ever before. But even amidst all the excitement, Ethan couldn't shake a feeling, a sense that there was more he could do, something bigger that hadn't yet been realized. One afternoon, as he sat in his office looking over the latest reports, a thought struck him. There were so many young people in the community who had potential but lacked direction. He remembered the boy at the community center with the painting of the house, how he had dreams but no clear path to achieve them. That was it. That's where he could make a difference. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan approached Thomas with a new proposal, a program focused on mentorship and career guidance for at-risk youth. The goal would be to provide teenagers with practical skills and opportunities to explore different career paths, helping them stay in school and build a foundation for their future. "I love it," Thomas said, leaning back in his chair thoughtfully. "But are you sure you want to take on something this big? It's a lot of responsibility." Ethan nodded firmly. "I know it is. But I believe in these kids, Thomas. They just need someone to show them that there's more out there for them, and I want to be that person." Altogether, with Thomas's blessing, Ethan threw himself into the new project. He spent weeks researching, meeting with educators, local businesses, and community leaders to design a program that would give young people the support and guidance they needed. He called it Pathways to Success, a name that reflected the vision he had for each of the participants. The program quickly gained traction. Local businesses offered internships, vocational schools provided scholarships, and volunteers signed up to mentor the teens. Ethan personally led workshops, teaching everything from job interview techniques to building self-confidence. He shared his own story with the kids, how he had gone from being a gardener with no clear direction to finding his purpose through helping others. The response was overwhelming. Teenagers who had once been on the brink of dropping out of school started showing up consistently. They listened intently to Ethan's lessons, participated in group discussions, and asked thoughtful questions. Slowly but surely, they began to believe in themselves and their potential. One day, during a session on goal setting, Ethan noticed a girl named Marissa sitting quietly at the back of the room. She was one of the newer participants, and unlike the others, she rarely spoke or engaged in activities. After the workshop, Ethan approached her. "Hey, Marissa. I'm glad you're here today," he said softly. She glanced up at him, her eyes wary. "I'm just here because I don't have anywhere else to go," she muttered. Ethan nodded, unfazed by her reluctance. "That's okay. I just want you to know that I'm here to help, if you ever want to talk or need anything." Marissa shrugged but didn't say anything more. Ethan didn't press her, but over the next few weeks, he made a point of checking in with her, offering small words of encouragement whenever he could. Gradually, she began to open up, sharing bits and pieces of her life. He learned that she had been in and out of foster care for years and felt like she had no future. No one had ever told her she was capable of achieving anything. One afternoon, after a particularly lively workshop, Marissa stayed behind. She walked up to Ethan, her gaze steady but unsure. "You really think I can do something with my life?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked her in the eyes, his expression serious. "I don't just think it, Marissa, I know it. You're smart, you're strong, and you have so much to offer. All you need is to believe it too." Marissa's eyes shimmered with something Ethan hadn't seen before. Hope. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." From that day forward, Marissa became one of the most engaged participants in the program. She showed up early, stayed late, and asked questions with a hunger to learn. Ethan watched her transformation with pride, knowing that he had played a small part in helping her see her own potential. As Pathways to Success continued to thrive, Ethan realized that his vision was becoming reality. He wasn't just helping kids stay in school, he was helping them build dreams, one step at a time. On the one-year anniversary of the program's launch, the foundation held a special event to celebrate its achievements. Parents, volunteers, and community leaders gathered to hear stories from the teens who had benefited from the program. One by one, they shared their experiences, how the program had changed their perspectives, given them confidence, and set them on a path they never thought possible. When it was Marissa's turn to speak, she stood at the podium, looking out at the audience with a calm confidence that took Ethan's breath away. "I used to think I didn't matter," she began, her voice clear and steady, "that I was just another kid who would fall through the cracks. But then I met Mr. Walker. He showed me that I have value, that I have a future. He believed in me when no one else did. Because of him, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving." Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he listened. This was what it was all about, helping young people see that they were capable of greatness. And as he looked around at the smiling faces in the room, he knew that Pathways to Success was just the beginning of something much bigger. As the years passed, Ethan's influence within the Walker Family Foundation continued to grow. His mentorship program, Pathways to Success, expanded far beyond its original scope. What started as a small initiative to help a few at-risk teens had blossomed into a comprehensive support system for young people across the city. The foundation opened additional community centers, each offering a safe space for teenagers to study, socialize, and plan for their futures. Ethan became a well-known figure in the community, often invited to speak at schools, churches, and events. But despite all the recognition and praise, he remained grounded and humble. He never saw himself as a hero or someone special. He was just a man who believed that every person deserved a chance to thrive. One rainy afternoon, Ethan was at his desk, reviewing a report on the latest achievements of the mentorship program, when his phone buzzed. It was a call from Thomas. "Ethan, I need you to come down to the main office," Thomas said, his voice carrying a note of excitement. "There's something I want to show you." Curious, Ethan made his way to the Foundation's headquarters. When he arrived, he found Thomas waiting for him with a large sealed envelope in his hands. "What's this?" Ethan asked, eyeing the envelope with intrigue. "Open it and see," Thomas urged, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Ethan carefully tore open the envelope and pulled out several documents. His eyes widened as he scanned the first page. It was an official letter from the City Council granting approval for a new community center, a center that would be named in his honor. The Ethan Walker Center for Youth Empowerment. He looked up at Thomas, his mouth slightly open in shock. I don't know what to say." Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder, his gaze filled with pride. "You deserve this, Ethan. The impact you've made on these kids, on this entire community, it's beyond words. This center will be a place where your legacy continues, where more young lives can be changed for the better." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He thought back to the day he'd been fired from Maplewood Estates, to the uncertainty and fear that had consumed him then. He never imagined that one act of kindness could lead to all of this. And now, here he was, standing at the precipice of something even greater. "Thank you, Thomas," Ethan said quietly. "But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us, the volunteers, the kids, everyone who believed in what we were doing. This is our legacy." Thomas nodded, his smile widening. "I couldn't agree more. But you should know, the city wants you to say a few words at the groundbreaking ceremony next week. They're expecting a big turnout." Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I guess I'd better start preparing." The day of the groundbreaking ceremony arrived, and hundreds of people gathered to celebrate the start of a new chapter. Community leaders, parents, and kids whose lives had been touched by Ethan's work filled the seats. As he stood at the podium, Ethan looked out at the crowd, his heart swelling with emotion. "Today isn't about me," he began, his voice carrying a steady strength. "It's about every young person who's ever felt like they didn't have a place in this world. It's about showing them that they matter, that they have a voice, and that they can achieve anything they set their minds to. This center is a symbol of hope, of second chances, and of the belief that we can all make a difference if we just care enough to try." The audience erupted in applause, and Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He thought of the kids who had come through the program, the ones who had gone on to college, started careers, and even returned to volunteer. He thought of Marissa, who was now in her second year of nursing school and volunteering at the very community center where she'd once felt lost and alone. After the ceremony, a small group of teens approached Ethan. They were part of the current cohort in the mentorship program. One of them, a boy named Jason, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Walker," he said shyly, "we just wanted to say thank you for everything. Because of you, we have a place where we belong. You showed us that we can be more than what people expect us to be." Ethan's chest tightened with emotion. "You don't have to thank me, Jason. I'm just happy to see you all thriving. Remember, this is your center now. It's here to help you become whoever you want to be." Jason nodded and glanced back at his friends, then looked at Ethan with a determined expression. "We want to help make it better. We want to give back like you did for us." Ethan felt his eyes well up as he smiled at the group of eager, hopeful faces. "That's the best gift you could ever give me." With the establishment of the Ethan Walker Center for Youth Empowerment, the Foundation's work reached new heights. Ethan continued to pour his heart into the center, mentoring young people, guiding new programs, and building partnerships that would ensure the center's success for years to come. And through it all, he remained true to his roots, humble, compassionate, and driven by a simple desire to help others. The years passed, and Ethan watched as his legacy grew. Kids who had once been lost found their way. Families who had struggled to stay afloat found stability, and a community that had been fractured came together, stronger and more united than ever before. Ethan often marveled at how everything had started, with one small act of kindness, one decision to help a little girl who seemed out of place in a beautiful garden. He realized then that it wasn't the size of the action that mattered, but the heart behind it. Because sometimes all it takes is one person to change everything. Years went by, and the Ethan Walker Center for Youth Empowerment became a cornerstone of the community. Its programs reached thousands of young people, helping them navigate the challenges of adolescence and find their footing in the world. Ethan, now in his 50s, continued to play an active role in the foundation, though he had taken a step back from the day-to-day operations to focus on mentorship and community outreach. One sunny afternoon, Ethan sat in the garden behind the center, watching a group of teenagers plant flowers along the walkway. It reminded him of the countless hours he had spent tending to the gardens at Maplewood Estates, long before his life had taken its unexpected turn. He smiled softly, his heart filled with gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. "Mind if I join you?" a familiar voice called out. Ethan turned and saw Thomas approaching, a warm smile on his face. He gestured for him to sit down on the bench beside him. "Of course, Thomas, what brings you here today?" Thomas settled beside him and looked out at the garden, the vibrant colors of the flowers dancing in the sunlight. "I wanted to talk to you about the next chapter for the foundation." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about what you've built here, Ethan," Thomas said thoughtfully. "It's become so much more than just a foundation. It's a place of hope and transformation. But I believe it's time to take it even further, to create more centers like this one, not just in this city, but in cities across the country." Ethan's eyes widened. "You want to expand nationwide?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, and I want you to be the one to lead this initiative, to share what we've done here, to inspire other communities, and to help even more young people find their way." Ethan felt a rush of emotions, excitement, disbelief, and a deep sense of responsibility. He looked out at the garden, at the kids who were laughing and chatting as they worked together. He thought about the countless lives that had been changed because of this place. Could they really replicate this success on a national scale? "I don't know what to say," Ethan murmured. "It's such a big step." Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder, his expression serious but kind. "You've never backed down from a challenge before, Ethan, and I know you won't now. This is your legacy. A legacy that can reach even further and change even more lives." Ethan took a deep breath, considering the possibilities. He thought about the early days of the foundation, when he wasn't sure if he could make a difference at all. But every step he had taken since then, every child he had helped, every program he had launched, it had all led to this moment. Finally, he turned to Thomas and nodded slowly. "Let's do it. Let's take this to the next level." Over the next few months, Ethan and Thomas worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork for the expansion. They met with community leaders, secured funding, and developed a comprehensive plan to replicate the success of the original center. The project took them across the country, visiting cities and towns where new centers would soon open. At each stop, Ethan shared his story, the story of a man who started as a gardener and ended up transforming lives through the power of kindness and compassion. His words resonated deeply with audiences, inspiring countless people to get involved and support the initiative. When the first new center opened in a small town in Texas, Ethan stood on the stage, looking out at a crowd of excited faces. He felt a surge of pride and joy as he spoke. "This isn't just a building," he said, his voice steady and clear. It's a place where dreams are nurtured, where hope is restored, and where every young person who walks through these doors will know that they matter. I believe that together we can build a brighter future, not just for our children but for all of us. The applause was deafening, and as Ethan looked around he knew that they were on the brink of something incredible. One by one, new centers opened in different states, each one modeled after the Ethan Walker Center, each one carrying his vision and values. Ethan continued to travel, meeting with staff and volunteers, ensuring that each center stayed true to its mission. He mentored new leaders, shared his experiences, and watched with pride as the foundation's impact grew beyond anything he had ever imagined. As the years passed, Ethan began to ease into a quieter role, stepping back from the demands of leadership. He spent more time at the original center, visiting the garden where it had all begun. He found solace among the flowers, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. One afternoon, as he walked through the garden, a voice called out to him. He turned and saw a young woman approaching, a bright smile on her face. It was Marissa. "Mr. Walker, I didn't know you'd be here today," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. Ethan smiled warmly. "Marissa, it's so good to see you. How's nursing school going?" "It's going great," she replied, her eyes shining. "I just finished my degree and I've been volunteering at the new center in Boston. I wanted to stop by and see you before I start my first job." Ethan felt a swell of pride as he looked at her, a girl who had once felt lost and hopeless, now a confident young woman ready to make her mark on the world. "I'm so proud of you, Marissa," he said softly. "You've come such a long way." She nodded, her smile turning serious. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Walker. You changed my life. And I know I'm not the only one. There are so many of us out there, kids who found hope because of you." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "It wasn't just me," he said gently. "It was all of us. This foundation, the people who work here, the volunteers, and you. You're part of that legacy now, Marissa." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'll make you proud. I promise." Ethan hugged her again, feeling a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. As he watched her walk away, he knew that his journey had come full circle. He had started out wanting to make a difference, and now he could see the ripple effect of his actions spreading out across the country. His story was more than just a tale of personal growth. It was a testament to the power of kindness and the belief that one person could indeed change the world. Ethan stood in the garden, the place where it had all begun, and smiled. He had found his purpose, his passion, and his legacy. And he knew, with unwavering certainty, that it would continue long after he was gone. Because true change doesn't end. It carries on, passed from one person to the next, lighting the way for future generations.